Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Npca Strategic Plan Public Information Session. I want to take the time to thank you so much for taking some time out of your busy summer schedules to join us tonight, and we're really pleased to welcome 130 people that registered to this event tonight. My name is Natalie Green. I am an Npca staff, and I'm the project manager who's leading the development of the strategic plan with help from a team from staff from across the organization, as well as the Npca CAO, with guidance from the Board Strategic Planning Committee, as well as the Public Advisory Committee. Please note that as per the webinar standard format, all of your microphones and cameras have been turned off. So before we begin this meeting, I would like to gratefully acknowledge that the Niagara Peninsula watershed from which we are gathering today is situated within the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee, Anishinaabeg, and Attawandarock. This territory is covered by the Upper Canada Treaties number 3, number 4, and number 381, and is within the land protected by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement. Today, this gathering place is home to many First Nation, Inuit, and Métis peoples, and this acknowledgement reminds us that our great standard of living is directly related to the resources and friendship of Indigenous peoples. So on the screen now is the agenda for tonight's information session. Joining us tonight is Npca CAO Chandra Sharma, as well as Aidan Grove White and Kelly Baker from Strategy Core. These are the consultants that have been helping us to facilitate the strategic planning activities. The Strategy Core team comes with extensive experience in strategic planning, environmental policy, and community engagement. They've worked on several local relevant strategic projects, including supporting Conservation Ontario in the development of their strategic plans. Aidan will moderate the Q&A portion of this session with support from Kelly, and I will be giving the presentation. So at this point, I'd like to turn it over to CAO Sharma for some introductory remarks.
Thank you, Natalie. Good evening, everyone. On behalf of staff and Board of Directors of Npca, please accept our warm welcome and gratitude for taking the time to participate in this important initiative. Your feedback is integral to shaping the new strategic plan. I would like to start by recognizing our board and Public Advisory Committee members who are participating with us tonight. Npca Vice Chair, Member Bruce McKenzie, Member Jack Halinga, Member Stu Beattie, Member John Ingrao, Member Bill Rapley, Member Jackie O'Black, who's the chair of our Public Advisory Committee, and Member Joe Schoenberger. Npca Chair Brenda Johnson and Chair of our Strategic Planning Committee, Ken Kowal, and Vice Chair Diana Hewson are not able to join us tonight, but I'm pleased to pass along their greetings over to you. And I thank all of our board members and public advisory members for their guidance and direction to Npca staff and myself as we navigated through this process. In a few moments, you will receive a presentation on our strategic plan. This strategic plan reaffirms our commitment to the mandate of Conservation Authority and charts the course for next generation of Conservation Authority work. What's unique about this strategic plan is that it's outcome-oriented. It has a strong focus on performance measures for the first time. It builds on the values and principles of conservation leadership, evidence-based decision-making, collaboration, exceptional customer service, respect, and integrity. Thank you again for being part of this important process. Please stay engaged. Thank you. I'll now hand it over to Natalie for the presentation.
Thank you. So before we get to the presentation, I do want to ask you a few quick questions. So we do have a poll that we're going to run. It will show up on your screen. Very simple questions just to get to know you a little bit and where you're coming from. So the first question is about where you live. So that should show up on your screen. You pick a selection, and if you choose other, you can also use the chat function and you can add where you're from, where you're joining us from tonight. So we'll just give you a minute or so to fill out your answer, and then we'll post the results on screen. looking at the answers coming in here. Okay, so just a few more people selecting. Okay, so can we go ahead and post those? Let's see, so 92% of you tonight, 49 are from the Niagara region. We've got a few people from the City of Hamilton and some others as well. Welcome. Again, if you want to put where you're from in your chat, the chat feature, you can go ahead and do that. We're going to start with the next question. Just get that up, give us a moment here. Okay, go ahead. All right, so just a question just for you to select which option best describes your role in the watershed. So we have quite a few listed here. If your role is not shown on screen, then you can also add that to the chat function if you'd like. I feel like we need some Jeopardy music to go with these questions. Okay, how are we looking for? Looks like a few more people are choosing. We see somebody from Niagara on the Lake. Okay, so we're ready to go. We'll give those a share. Let's see. All right, so it looks like majority is conservation area user. We've got some people from the agricultural, non-government organization, general public, 28%. Looking good. All right. Thank you for filling that out. We've got one more for you. This one's very easy. We just like to know if you participated in the survey earlier this spring, the strategic planning survey. The answers are coming in. Okay, if we've got everyone, we can share those. Okay, pretty evenly split. 47% did participate, 42 did not, and about 10% are not quite sure. Well, thank you very much for that. So we'll get started now. Just gotta navigate my buttons here. All right. Okay, so on your screen, you should see a nice timeline. It just provides an overview of the entire strategic planning process and where we are in that process. So we started back in the fall of 2020 with planning and putting the staff team together and putting together a communication and engagement for this project. Then we started with our engagement internally with staff, as well as the strategic planning committee. And then we also reached out to all of you in external engagement. We launched the Get Involved portal, which most of you have likely seen. That's how you were able to register for this event tonight. And then we launched our public survey at that time as well in the winter of 2021. Those results will be presented to you tonight. Then we took all of that information and synthesized all of it and started developing the key components of the strategic plan, which you will see tonight as well. We're in summer 2021 now, and we did some internal engagement with staff recently, yesterday, and presented them with the key components as well. And then tonight's public information session is a key integral part of this process. We'll be using the information that you provide to us in the feedback, and that will help us shape the draft strategic plan before it is presented to the strategic planning committee as well as the board of directors. We are aiming for a fall completion of the strategic plan. So right now the red dot on the screen is where we're at along the process. Public engagement was really important to us from the very beginning. We wanted to inform the community, the stakeholders, our partners about the strategic planning process, and we wanted to collect feedback from all of you so that we could better shape the next 10 years of conservation in the watershed. We mainly use digital tools to be able to do this through the Get Involved portal and social media because of the ongoing pandemic and its restrictions. However, we did offer traditional methods, non-virtual methods for some people to participate as well. The public survey was launched on March the 30th until May the 6th. A total of 501 surveys were completed. The comments were all reviewed by staff, and I will present those results to you tonight. So if these are the stats, the analytics from our outreach and engagement on the first stage of public engagement, which was the survey that many of you participated in the spring, winter, spring. The analytics from that survey indicate that many people were aware and engaged in the Npca strategic planning process, which we are absolutely thrilled with. Our campaigns show that almost 1 million people saw or heard our ads. And then there are other stats there. I encourage you to take a look at these results. They are currently posted on our Get Involved portal, and this slide deck will also be available after the meeting tonight. So total, as I mentioned, 501 surveys were received, and that is a combination of paper and online surveys. Most of the surveys were completed online. Most of the surveys were also submitted by people from the Niagara region, with some participants coming from the city of Hamilton and Haldimand County, so much like the public meeting tonight. The demographics or groups from that survey, most of the respondents identified as being from the general public, 43.5%. And the next largest group was conservation area users. So thank you so much. In the survey, we were aiming to get feedback toward a shared vision for our strategic plan. Our vision statement is our declaration of our future purpose and aspirations. Staff took a first stab at this at an internal staff engagement session. We came up with a few phrases. We had 10 of them in the survey that were presented that came directly from staff for our vision statement. And we asked you in the survey to vote on your top 3 selections. So the bar graph that you see on the right-hand side of the slide is actually the results from those choices that you made on the vision statement. So you can see quite large support for about 3 of them there. Then we asked the very same question to the board of directors, and those are the blue stars that are overlaid on top of the graph. So you can see quite a similar pattern with the board selection as well as the public selection, or the survey respondents. And then we asked our public advisory committee to provide their top choices for those vision statements as well. And what we get is a shared common phrase for us to take a look at and to start shaping our vision statement from there. So the one that was the top phrase shared by all, that blue bar that's very tall in the middle, is a healthy landscape now and for future generations. The key takeaways from the public survey were that the draft strategic priorities that we presented during the survey that came from staff developed all received strong support, except marketing as a destination of choice. And I will go through some of those comments and the feedback that we received on each of those draft priorities in just a moment. We did take that feedback quite seriously, and we did make some revisions as an outcome, as a result of those of that feedback. The feedback was generally positive and very supportive. There was some misunderstanding of the Npca's roles and responsibilities. And also what we saw was that there's a need for us as a staff to be aware of the language and terminology used while we're shaping our strategic plan. So the first draft priority that was presented, healthy and climate resilient watersheds, received very strong support, an average rating of 4.6. This was the top rated strategic priority. Some of the sample feedback is shown here. Most of it was very positive, and the sentiment was really about protecting our watersheds, valuing our watershed, valuing the natural features of the landscape, and also just taking a look at some of the language that we use there. Sustainable growth received an average rating of 4.1. Some of the sample feedback here, the sentiments were about smart growth principles, more focused development, green infrastructure, low impact development, just trying to use our role in land use planning and shaping what we can do within the watershed. Connecting people to nature was the second highest rated strategic priority at an average rating of 4.5. And most of the sentiment here was just about people sharing that they love connecting to nature, that they feel that it's important for their health and well-being, and that more education and more stewardship will lead to more stewardship of the environment. Organizational excellence received an average rating of 4.1. The feedback here was really related to organizations should always strive for excellence and that we should be doing the same. And there was some of the key feedback listed here was for staff to have a healthy work-life balance, which is great. Thank you for thinking of staff. The Npca policy should be transparent, that we should have a customer service focus. Financial sustainability and innovative business models received an average rating of 3.9 out of 5. All of the comments here were related to the finances, considering a fee for service, that there's a reliance on the municipal levy, some comments about how we're going to diversify our funding and which business models we might be selecting. So there was quite a few comments about just making sure that there are mutual goals, that our financial sustainability relies on working together with others and that it makes sense for the Npca. Partner of choice received an average rating of 3.9, and the feedback here again was that we should be working together to get the job done and protect and restore the watersheds. Some key points here: working with the government, with local outdoor clubs, depends on who you choose as a partner, but most of the feedback here was quite positive. And then the last one received an average rating of 3.4, which, as I mentioned earlier, it was the lowest of the 7 priorities that were presented to the public. So some of the feedback here was related to the concern that our properties could not maintain the capacity of having more people come to them. So that you'll see that in the sentiment of those select comments here. The intention with this particular strategic priority was to continue to advance the reputation of our conservation areas. Given it's such an important issue, we wanted it to continue to be included in the strategic plan. So it's actually now a goal under a different priority. So now the key components of the draft strategic plan, which I'm sure you're all very excited to see. We'll get started with the vision, which is quite simply nature for all. The conservation, we recognize that the conservation of nature is critical for people, plants, and wildlife. We envision a healthy and vibrant environment with shared green space, with clean water that sustains life for future generations. Our mission is to create a common ground for conservation-inspired action and accountability to nature. We have 4 guiding principles that will help us with our day-to-day work as the Npca organization moves forward with its strategic plan. I won't read them word for word for you tonight, but they will be posted on the portal if you'd like to take a closer look at them. The 4 principles, as CEO Sharma mentioned earlier, are related to an environment first, to natural green infrastructure being critical for our day-to-day lives, for collaboration and diverse input and ideas to build stronger outcomes, and to have innovation to help us be progressive, resilient, and adaptable, and to help make sure that we remain a valued and trusted partner. We have 4 core values, and these came from staff. They are integrity, respect, customer service, and conservation leadership. And again, this speaks to how we conduct ourselves and how we are going to move forward with our strategic plan. Our strategic direction is, so now we've listened to what the feedback was and we've made some adjustments. And so we are now looking at 6 strategic priorities, and they're on the screen here. And this is our direction moving forward to help make sure that we as an organization are moving together in the same directions, that we are fulfilling our goals and fulfilling our vision and mission statements. So I'll take you through each of these strategic directions and provide you with some examples of actions as well as the strategic goals for each of them. So the first, healthy and climate resilient watersheds, improving nature for the betterment of all life across the watershed. We know that nature, like forests, wetlands, and ravine systems, provide critical life-saving services to people and wildlife. They can help mitigate the effects of climate change, reduce the risk of flooding to people and properties, and provide important habitat for wildlife. We have 4 goals, strategic goals listed under this priority. The first is to support evidence-based decision-making for climate-resilient watersheds and shorelines, protect people and properties from natural hazards and climate impacts, restore and enhance natural habitat, water resources, and forest cover, manage Npca lands to increase biodiversity and connectivity and natural cover. Some of the example actions under these goals would be to implement a robust data collection, analysis, monitoring program, to develop a solid understanding of climate impacts on the Npca watersheds, to complete and update our floodplain mapping, to develop a watershed-based resource management strategy, which is mandated as part of the Conservation Authorities Act, to develop programs aimed at urban and rural landowners, for example, urban stewardship program and agricultural best management practices, and to complete and implement the Npca land acquisition strategy. The next, supporting sustainable growth. This is about helping to create resilient communities through our role in land use planning and leading the use of sustainable technologies. With our support, communities can adequately prepare for a changing climate and related environmental challenges accomplished through the implementation of relevant policies, principles, and sustainable best practices. So we have 3 strategic goals here. Maintain a high standard of client services, tools, and procedures for planning, review, and permits. Lead an integrated watershed management approach to support planning and policy for the protection and enhancement of watersheds. Lead the implementation of sustainable technologies and green infrastructure best practices for climate resilience and sustainability. So some examples of actions here are the continuous improvement of the implementation of our Npca client services standard for plan and permit review, communicating the role and responsibilities of the Npca in the plan review and permitting, updating our policies, establishing the Sustainable Technologies Evaluation Program at the Npca, and implementing green infrastructure best practices through development proposals as well as at Npca properties. Connecting people to nature is about improving access to and connections with nature for the health and well-being of people. The recent COVID-19 pandemic has really shown us all that green space is incredibly important. Creating opportunities to connect with nature and educating people about its benefits will lead to increased stewardship across the watershed. The 4 strategic goals here are to create equitable access to green space for the health and well-being of people, lead nature education, environmental stewardship, and volunteerism, improve cultural connections and heritage appreciation, and promote the watershed as a destination of choice for adventure, culture, and ecological tourism. Some example actions would be for us to identify and remove socioeconomic barriers to accessing Npca properties and programs, proactively seeking opportunities to enhance trail connections with active transportation routes like cycling and walking, strengthen and continue to deliver education programs for various socioeconomic and multilingual groups, and examining opportunities to expand cultural connections and heritage programming at all conservation areas. Partner of choice is strengthening our relationships with stakeholders, partners, watershed communities, and Indigenous peoples towards shared stewardship, knowledge exchange, and collective impact. Together, we can accomplish a lot more to achieve our mutual goals and improve the overall health of the watershed that sustains us. We strive to become a strong partner of choice within the community to provide our expertise to the watershed, build capacity to deliver on mutual outcomes, as well as sharing knowledge. The first strategic goal is to strengthen government relations toward collective outcomes and impact, foster relationships with the community, environmental non-government organizations, businesses, industry, and academic institutions for collective outcomes and impact, and improve engagement with local First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples that support shared stewardship. So some of the example actions under this priority would be to develop a government relations strategy, collaborate with local educational institutions on mutual research interests that enhance knowledge sharing, collaborate with ENGOs, with businesses and industry on projects and initiatives that enhance stewardship and advance mutual goals, develop engagement guidelines with Indigenous peoples for shared stewardship, provide mentorship and employment opportunities for Indigenous people that support the cross-cultural exchange of knowledge, and provide Indigenous awareness training for Npca staff. Organizational excellence is striving for excellence through high standards of service delivery and accountability to the environment and its people. We want to attract and retain and invest in high caliber, diverse talent to deliver on exemplary outcomes. Our second goal is to improve internal operations and processes, provide high standards of customer service, and demonstrate leadership in addressing climate change and sustainable practices through Npca lands and operations. Example actions would be to develop a digital transformation strategy, develop customer service guidelines and improve customer service feedback mechanisms, develop a corporate climate change strategy to implement actions that reduce the Npca's climate impacts and carbon footprint. Financial sustainability is ensuring that we have a financially stable and sustainable organization and continued service delivery through innovative business models, diverse funding sources, and best practices. The first strategic goal is to ensure responsible, sustainable, and stable fiscal practices. The second goal is to optimize self-generated revenue using innovative approaches. And the third goal is to improve asset management and close the state of good repair gap. Some example actions would be to establish an asset management plan with proactive asset management program and complete and deploy a natural asset management accounting initiative and support municipalities as appropriate. So the next steps in this process are after tonight's meeting, we're going to welcome feedback until September the 3rd. We're going to take a look at that feedback, compile and synthesize it, and make adjustments as needed. We will be using that feedback to prepare our draft strategic plan for review by the Strategic Planning Committee and the Public Advisory Committee. And as I mentioned earlier, we'll be looking for approval by the Board of Directors in the fall of 2021. And then we'll begin taking that strategic plan and implementing it so that we can begin moving forward with our goals and actions. So at this time, I'd like to open it up for a moderated Q&A session. We are going to use the Zoom chat feature, the Q&A feature at the bottom of the screen. It should have Q&A at the bottom. We ask that you put your questions there. They're a little bit harder to take a look at in the chat feature. And what we're asking you is do you have any questions about what was presented tonight? Are there any other recommendations you would like to share with us? And we will do our very best to answer all of your questions, but we may not be able to. So just trust that we, staff, will be reviewing all of the questions and considering all of them. We just may not get to them all tonight. And of course, after the meeting, if something comes up that you didn't think about at the time, you can submit your questions on the Npca's Get Involved portal, and I will provide the website at the end of the meeting. So this time I'll turn it over to Aiden, and I will stop sharing my screen. If I can. There we go.
Hey there. Thank you, Natalie, and thank you, Npca, for hosting us all this evening. I'll give another couple of seconds to for people to get their questions into the chat box. But I just want to say how great it is that all of you made it here. Strategic planning is something that we at Strategy Corp are very, very passionate about. It's really important for organizations, particularly public sector organizations and agencies, to undertake this. And it's even more important that that folks like you come and participate in it. So thank you all again for coming. So I see our first question right now is what does financial sustainability mean in layman's terms? And does that mean you're opening this? You're opening up, I presume that's lands owned by Npca to developers. I think I'll turn it over to Chandra to answer that question.
Thank you, Aiden. And whosoever asked that question, I thank them for asking the question. To me, and in general, financial sustainability really means that we are being a balanced organization. We are managing our resources well. We are not spending more than what we make or earn. We are balancing our budgets. We have enough resources to support the most important functions of the organization. And we diversify our funding resources. For instance, there is federal, provincial grant opportunities that we can leverage. We can collaborate with our partners to build a trail or do some infrastructure work. So there's efficiencies of scale, collaboration, diversification. There's a lot of strategies that are used by organizations to make sure in the long term, we are able to deliver on our mandate. And as you know, province has just updated the Conservation Authorities Act, and conservation authorities are mandated to also generate their own revenues for things that cannot be supported through levy or tax-funded dollars. So I think it's a balancing act, and it has to be done with the right mindset, with the right approach. And as I said in the beginning, we have to take a balanced approach in doing that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I think we have a bit of a related question coming up, and one of my favorites. So I'm looking forward to hearing how you answer this. But when we talk about asset management, what is it that we actually mean? I think that there's a lot of people who think that that means liquidating assets or just repairing things. What is it that we're talking about when we talk about asset management?
I mean, I think in the financial terms, assets of an organization are both tangible and non-tangible. When you speak of Npca, as people know, we managed 41 conservation areas. We own 41 conservation properties. Those are our assets. Everything within those conservation areas, the gates, the infrastructure, the buildings, the houses, the heritage infrastructure that we have inherited with those properties, those are all Npca assets. Our office is our asset. Right now, we don't own it, but for organizations who own their own buildings, those are their assets. Our workshops, our park maintenance materials, our vehicles, those are all qualified as assets of an organization. Now, in terms of this strategic plan, when we say we are going to reduce state of good repair and prepare an asset management plan, we're talking about the infrastructure that is readily available to the public to enjoy our parks. And more recently, the legislation also defines green infrastructure as an important asset. So the number of trees, the forest cover, the meadows that you have within your parks and green spaces that is undertaking or providing a function, an ecological function for the community, that also needs to be accounted as an asset. And there is a way to do that. So Npca is going to be at the forefront of this and we'll try and show some leadership in the region to try and quantify that and manage it properly for now and future generations.
So I think I think it sounds like you're taking a really broad approach to what you define as an asset of the Conservation Authority. And just to be clear for the questioner, asset management doesn't mean selling the asset. It means taking care of it and making sure it's in a state of good repair. And it means making sure that it's available for use. And if you're not managing the asset, you're probably neglecting it. And so Npca is proposing to have asset management in this way as one of its major strategic priorities. Thank you very much for that answer. Here's a question. What would be, and I think maybe this gets to something Natalie can talk a little bit about too. So what are some of the best ways that we can have elementary and secondary school students and their schools be a part of moving these strategic initiatives forward? So maybe I'll ask Natalie, because you're really leading a lot of the strategic planning, and then maybe turn it over to Chandra right afterwards.
Sure. So we have a quite extensive volunteer program base. So secondary students can help us out in moving forward these strategic goals by participating in volunteers. And if anybody is listening and would like to join, you can visit our website and fill out the volunteer contact form and participate that way. We're also looking to partner with the school boards to help advance our goals. We have education programs and a new nature school as well. So we offer a lot of different educational opportunities that students and teachers alike can get involved in. And I would encourage people to visit our website and contact staff and find ways to get more involved that way.
Great, thank you. Chandra, did you have anything you wanted to add to that answer? Or?
No, Natalie did a good job.
Great. And now this next question, I think, really speaks to the importance of one of the foundational relationships that we have in Canada, let alone in the Conservation Authority area. And it's about in what ways are Indigenous peoples and their communities being included in land use decision making and in setting the Npca's goals.
So I would say, Aidan, that we have made a very strong commitment to engage First Nations and our commitment to truth and reconciliation. At present, we are working with Mississaugas of the Credit, Natalie herself, on the Remedial Action Program. We have several programs going on where we engage our First Nations partners. Going forward in the future, like Natalie said, we have a commitment to do several things. One, train our own staff to understand the cultural sensitivities and those connections through training. That's an important goal we want to recognize, and we do it right now, and we want to do more of it through our signage in our parks, land recognition. We want to make sure that when we hire summer students, seasonal students, we reach out to our First Nation partners. I recently met with Six Nation partners and we talked about these priorities. So those are some of the things we are planning on going forward, and consultation on important aspects of Npca work, our planning policies, our land acquisition strategy. And those are the kind of things we want to have open dialogue and consultation and engagement with our First Nation partners. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And changing gears a little bit, our next question has to do with retaining natural areas and green corridors and choosing areas of concern. So how does the Npca choose areas of concern with regard to retaining natural areas and green corridors without isolating them or creating islands, I suppose, or pockets, I suppose, amid the rampant and unchecked development in southern Niagara? I think we'll unpack that a little bit, but how does the Npca choose areas of concern when there are a lot of pressures, and particularly when it comes to retaining natural areas and green corridors?
I mean, there's a couple of questions included in there if you're looking from a development planning perspective and Npca's role in land use planning and development. That's mandated by the province. Our role is of hazard management. So we're looking at hazard lands. We're looking at wetlands. We're looking at regulated areas along the rivers and valleys. And those are defined in the legislation. And how Npca manages them is we do our own mapping, we do our own floodplain mapping, we do our technical work, and we have detailed information internally to look at those areas and review them as planning applications and other projects come up. So that's from a planning and development perspective. When it comes to land acquisition or protection of land and bringing it into public ownership, if there is an opportunity, there is a criteria to acquire land. So if you are looking at an opportunity, you're looking at ecological benefits, connections, corridors, buffers. There's a lot of things that we look at from a scientific perspective in arriving at the decision to acquire a property, habitat, flora, fauna, connectivity to existing natural systems, and of course, public benefits, So all of that is brought into consideration when making those decisions. I hope I answered the question, and Aidan, if there's any other question within it that you see, I'm happy to take that on.
Well, I think that it sort of sounds like it's a mixture of opportunity, pressure, and science. And your job, in part, at the Conservation Authority is to bring those together and set the priorities. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, science, like I said, evidence-based decision-making is what we do. We are a science organization. We are the center of excellence for science and data and information, and our decisions are guided by that, for sure, yes.
Thank you. And I think this one might be a bit more for Natalie, but can you tell us a little bit about how municipalities were drawn into the strategic planning process?
So municipalities were notified similarly to the rest of the stakeholders and community members. We do have municipal representatives on our board of directors as well as our strategic planning committee. So we've reached out in the same way and offered the same level of engagement throughout to ensure that they've had a say in participating in the survey. And we do have many municipal representatives at this meeting tonight.
Thanks. And here's another one about agency relationship. I think that this is a question more broadly about how you work in partnership with Niagara Parks Commission, but could you tell us a little bit about that relationship between Npca and the Niagara Parks Commission? Perhaps Chandra, that would be one for you.
Natalie works very closely with them on the Niagara River app, so I'll let Natalie speak to that.
Sure.
Okay.
Yes, we have a very close partnership with the Niagara Parks Commission as they are the stewards of the Niagara River, and the Npca does coordinate the Niagara River Remedial Action Plan. I happen to be the project manager on that project as well. So we worked very closely on creating very recently creating coastal wetlands along the shores of the Niagara River. We're working on a partnership right now to improve the buffer area, so that linkage between the land and the water along the shoreline of the upper Niagara River between Fort Erie and Niagara Falls. A lot of different stewardship initiatives. We're working together to administer a fishing survey to local anglers to understand what people are eating from the Niagara River. We just work very closely on anything Niagara River focused and hoping to expand our relationship with them. We have worked together in the past prior to, you probably saw on the slide, one of the pictures that had a riparian buffer, so native plants that were planted with Niagara Parks on their property. We've done tree plantings and that nature of things. So a lot of different things that are related to the Niagara River mainly, and looking forward to continuing that relationship with Niagara Parks.
Another questioner is curious. There's not much in the way of a mention of agriculture, and do folks at Npca see improving relations with the agricultural community as a higher priority? Is it just that it's not mentioned here? What would you like to say about that?
Agriculture community, like any landowner, is very, very important to Npca, and especially in this jurisdiction for this conservation authority, because a majority of our land is in agriculture use. That's a major land use in our jurisdiction, in our watershed. The relationship with agriculture community shows up in two locations in the strategic plan. For sure, one within the healthy watershed, healthy and resilient watershed, where we want to understand the impacts of climate change and come up with vulnerabilities from climate change and find strategies to deal with that. And that, of course, will deal with every land use, every sector. So that partnership will be important there in understanding the impacts to our watershed and finding solutions to that. Beyond that, we are also committed to new research and science, working with our academic partners to find solutions for the agriculture community. And then thirdly, it's the stewardship piece. We already, through our restoration program, work with the agriculture community on best management practices. And this program, or this strategic plan, calls for enhancement of our restoration program so we can do more and do better. So thank you.
Thank you very much. I just want to say, I think that we're seeing a lot of questions in the chat that are quite specific, and no one's ignoring them. But I just want to be clear with folks that the strategic plan is generally, we bring things up to a higher level than some of these questions that are quite specific. But I'm sure if you reach out to staff outside of this, if we don't get to your question and you reach out to staff outside of this facilitated session, I'm sure they'd be happy to answer some of these questions. With the strategic plan, we're trying to keep it at a level that can govern the next 10 years. And so some of these things are really just too specific to get mentions. But there are a lot in here that do speak to that broader strategic point. We'll do our best to get through to all of them. This one was a really big deal for a lot of our work in conservation authorities, and I think it's a great question. How did the provincial changes to the Conservation Authorities Act impact the strategic plan development?
That's a very good question, Aidan. And this is the first question that came up with our board and strategic planning committee. The timing was very good because as we were developing the strategic plan, the province was coming up with those changes. So we were able to align them really well and look at what is coming down the pipe and how we needed to adjust. So I would say the overall mandate and the purpose of the Conservation Authority remains natural resource management. So nothing changes there. There are improvements to regulation and changes to the regulation here and there, and we have adjusted our actions, our priorities accordingly. This is a 10-year strategic plan. So, I mean, conservation authorities, with the changes to the Conservation Authorities Act, now can undertake 3 types of programs. One, that are called core mandate of the Conservation Authority or mandated by the province. And those are like the hazard management programs, flood management programs, and source water program I mentioned. The second category of programs are programs that municipalities want conservation authorities to undertake as their service providers or supporters, and we're ready to take that up and serve our communities and municipalities where we can, planting more trees, restoring more lands. The third category of programs are programs that the Conservation Authority Board, under the broader mandate of natural resource management, will authorize to undertake. And these are the program where I said at the beginning, diversification of our funding, whether we get funding from the province or the federal government, those are the program, or any other source. So those are the programs that we will undertake or continue to undertake with the direction of the board. So overall, I think it's still a broad category of natural resource management work, cumulative watershed work that we will continue to undertake as illustrated or mentioned in this strategic plan. Thank you.
Great. So now we've heard from one of the questioners that they're concerned that they didn't hear about the need to acquire environmentally significant lands in order to prevent their destruction through site alteration and development. Would you be able to speak to that a little bit?
It has to be very specific, Aidan. I'm not sure if this is related to a specific issue. I'm certainly happy to take that question on and answer later.
Okay.
Yeah.
So could you comment on some of the considerations or allowances within the strategic plan regarding socioeconomic impacts of pandemics, whether it's the one that we're in right now, I suppose, or one in the future?
I'm glad somebody asked that question. It's a very important question because the pandemic exposed us to a lot of things that we never anticipated. The first 6 months of pandemic, we did not know, and people probably did not realize how important green infrastructure was for the mental health well-being of our communities and socioeconomic for those reasons. So I think it was a challenge. Everybody was going through that. We managed it really well. We, at the front end of the pandemic, left our conservation areas open. Our staffs were at the front line. We wanted the communities to come and enjoy the green space, the green infrastructure that was so important during that time of lockdown. Npca passive conservation areas were open. So with that spirit, I think we know now, it's proven how important the 41 properties that we own are to the communities of Niagara, and how important public green space in general is for the communities of Niagara. So I think along those lines, we will continue to upgrade the infrastructure or assets within these properties. We will make them more accessible from a socioeconomic perspective. We're looking at everything from that lens. How can we make our programs and properties and green space more accessible to and more equitable to everyone in Niagara? Thank you.
That's great. Yeah, no, I know for me in particular, I had no idea how much I would come to value the conservation areas all around the GTA and the Greater Golden Horseshoe. I probably visited a couple dozen of them in the last year. So thanks to you, your staff, and all the other Conservation Authority staff people out there who have maintained these spaces for us. Here's a question about your role in comments when new developments are brought to municipalities, and your role in permitting. In making comments in the permitting process. Will the Npca be strong in protecting wetland? I suppose this means presenting a strong case in protecting wetland and forest and the adequate buffers, the 30 meters, when you're in the permitting review and comment process.
We are, all I can say to our listeners tonight is that Npca is updating our policy. We are developing a procedural manual. I think there is a lack of understanding or common understanding of the role conservation authorities have in development planning and review. And I think it's important that we be more transparent in how decisions are taken. And a procedural manual does that lays out the guiding principles, the procedures, the decision-making metrics that has been used, the guidelines. And Npca is in the process of developing that, and it will be shared publicly so people can see how decisions are made and how we are undertaking our mandated role in that planning and permitting on the planning and permitting side of things. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you. And I think we're getting close to the end of our time here in this question and answer session. And this has to be one of my favorite questions to ask senior leaders. But what do you see as the biggest challenge for the Npca in the next 10 years? And to that, I'm going to ask you also to maybe throw in what you think the biggest opportunity is.
Well, I'm glad you asked that question. And I think the whole strategic plan, when it was developed, we undertook an analysis of what threats or opportunity might be going forward in our watershed. And as you can see, for every watershed, I mean, one is your growing populations and pressure on green space and making sure you make your green space available to the communities and it's healthy and resilient from a habitat, wildlife perspective. What needs to be protected needs to be protected. Now going forward in future, we have a few challenges. We are going to see extreme weather. We are going to see climate change. We are going to see population growth and more pressure on our watershed. And together, all of these things do impact our natural resources. So that's the biggest challenge for Conservation Authority, to manage them so we can keep enjoying the things we do, and we can continue to protect the habitat and natural spaces the way we want to do that. The biggest opportunity I see is what we just talked about, the importance of green space and the role of conservation authority in future is going to be very important. The purpose of the conservation authority is to protect and enhance the natural resources, and that mandate is so critical going forward in future, and the work we do is going to be very, very important as we see these changes going forward. So thank you for asking that question.
Well, and I've just been told that we actually have time for a couple more, and we have some here that I think are important, but I'll say in advance they might be a little bit challenging. And so one person is asking about the role of working with developers when it comes to generating revenue and balancing that if it can be done with their interests. Do you have any thoughts on that you would want to share? How do we work with developers when many in the community, particularly in the environmental sector, feel like that there's a real incompatibility there?
I mean, if you're looking at, so there's, for Npca's work, Aidan, there are two aspects of our work. People need to understand that. One aspect is the planning and permitting role, and that's where we work with developers. And it's the same process for a permit application for an individual that is for the developer. And I think our approach there is to work with the proponent, to guide them through the technical process, to help them do the right thing so the approvals are timely and collective outcomes can be achieved. So that's the role there. And on the other side, there is the partner of choice opportunity. There's a partnership opportunity. If a development industry partner comes in with the proposal of a socioeconomic benefit to restore a big park or invest in the Conservation Authority Foundation. We have a NPCF Conservation Foundation to donate to them. And those are the partnership opportunities we look at in both from the private sector and public sector and NGO and community partners. So it's a balancing act.
Thanks. And does another question that we have here, does the Npca have plans to test the water in their lands?
We have a very broad water quality monitoring program, as people know, and there is an annual report that's published. It's based on provincial parameters and where we need to do extra work for a partner. So, I mean, we do test water on our lands where we allow water recreation activity. And for instance, it will be Binbrook Conservation Area. That's where we do that. We have monitoring stations along the water courses, and those are standard protocols that we undertake. The times we go collect water samples or what we collect as in terms of water samples and what we test for. And those are reported through that water quality monitoring report. It's available on our website.
Thank you. And here's another one that can be a bit thorny, but what protects the ownership of the 41 Conservation Authority properties if Queen's Park were to pass an act that privatizes, or I suppose disbands, the conservation authorities? That's a tricky question.
As a head of a conservation authority and as a person who has worked for conservation authorities for 22 years now, I say that there is a broader understanding of the importance of conservation authority work, and I hope that day never comes.
All right, I think that's fair. And here's a question that I think there's probably a quick answer, but there's probably also, you could probably spell out a little bit. But the question is, I think, about resources fundamentally, about making those choices that you were talking about earlier. And it's about how much is spent in the Npca watershed on the separation of storm and sanitary sewers. There's the questioner hypothesizes that half of this money, if it were used for land acquisition, would have a major positive impact. And I know that storm and sewer separation is not the role or responsibility of the Npca, but I think that it goes to the broader questions about priorities, environmental priorities working with municipalities and that sort of thing. So maybe you could spin off some of your thoughts on that one as well.
Aiden, you answered it really well already. It's not the responsibility of Npca to separate storm and sanitary sewer. It's the municipal responsibility. And we do not spend any money on that. Our responsibility is riverine, river-related water in the rivers and creeks and the lake, and that's what we do.
So I think from the Npca's perspective, it's not really either or. It's if they want to do that, that's great, but it's not part of your mandate or responsibilities.
It's not, yes.
Here's a question about, are you planning on dredging the lake at Chippewa? There's a concern that it's getting, that wildlife, fish and turtles in particular are going to have trouble surviving if it's not, I suppose if it's not dredged.
I'll have to take that question back to Steph. I'll certainly do that, yes, and get back to the individual.
And when we're looking at, I'm just going through some of these other parts of the question, but I think there's a fundamental question here about our developers and those in the land development industry. Are they included as stakeholders in the strategic plan?
Yes, everybody's a stakeholder who works with Npca.
So they are included.
Yeah.
Great. And I think I'm seeing, there was someone has asked again, are you considering opening up sales to developers, I suppose land owned by the Npca? Are you considering opening up those lands to developers?
No, people need to understand when a property comes under conservation authority jurisdiction, like I said at the beginning, it comes for a reason. It has sensitive natural habitat or heritage value, or it's significant in some other way. This Npca does not have any plans to sell any of its land to anybody at this point. It's available for public use and habitat protection.
Great. Great. So we've answered all the questions that are sort of broader. I think there's one question here that I just want to acknowledge, but I think it might be I think that it might be too specific, but I'll put it out there. A First Nations person living in Fonthill is very interested in protecting the watershed in Niagara and wants to know what the plans are to test the water originating from Fonthill Cane. Is this something that you can speak to now, or is this something that we can follow, that would be followed up with best by staff?
Aidan, I've answered that question in the chat as well, and just directed that individual to our website. We have an extensive monitoring program, and if in a water quality report that was just produced recently. So if the specific site that they're looking at is not listed there and they want to know more, that's a question that we can take back to staff, and npca.ca/contact us or contact, and you can get a listing of how to get a hold of us on that specific question. Thank you.
Great. So I don't know, Natalie, does that cover everything that's been coming in? It's been hard to keep track of everything over here, but
I think I see one at the top that's been upvoted a few times about permitting, and unless I missed it, but permitting and commenting on developments in the 30-meter buffer. That would be a requirement to protect wetland and forests.
I think we
Did we cover that one and I missed it? I was writing.
Yeah, that's okay. I think we did cover it a bit earlier. So I think that might mean we've come to a conclusion of our questions and answers. Great.
Okay.
So,
Aiden, I just am reading the chat box and somebody has made a comment that I must mention, that I may not be aware of the South Nation Conservation Authority Phosphorus Trading Program. I am, and it's not just South Nations, it's like Simcoe Conservation Authority as well. Npca can get really progressive in the long run. There are a lot of things that we can do. We are taking one step at a time. And I want to assure the listeners that there is no shortage of collaboration opportunities and progressive work. And I'm open to that. People should know I come from 22 years of Conservation Authority experience, and I'm well aware of all the programs that are happening within the other conservation authorities, and happy to bring them over to Niagara, but it takes time, and everything has to be done at the right time, and it has to be the right climate. Like things that can work here can work here. You know, we have a different climate, we have a different landscape in our watershed. And before I end, I also want to recognize that one of our board members, Member Woodhouse, just joined, and I was not able to recognize his participation. So thank you, Member Woodhouse, for joining us tonight. Really appreciate your time.
And I think thank you all. This has been very educational for me, and I appreciate. I threw some tough ones at you there, Chandra. So thanks for answering them. And I'm sure there's lots of people with lots more questions. And as Natalie said, staff are ready, willing, and able to hear from folks. And particularly for some of those more specific ones, you can get in touch with them directly. So thank you very much.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for joining.
So before we end, I want to echo the sentiment and thank you so much, and just assure you that there's still opportunity for your comments and your feedback to be submitted. And all of the information will be posted. A recording of this meeting will be posted on the Get Involved portal, as well as a copy of the slide deck for you to take a look at. We ask that you provide your questions and leave a comment on the Get Involved portal. We will do our very best to answer your questions there, but rest assured that we will review all of your questions and everything will be considered. We just may not be able to reply to every single question that we see. After the session is over, I encourage you to take a moment and fill out the survey about this particular session. We want to know where we can improve and what we can do better. So when you close the window, there will be a link. There should be a link in the Zoom window to a survey, and I will be also sent to you in a follow-up email after this session. Again, if you have any questions, visit our getinvolved.npca.ca portal for additional information and to leave a comment. And just again, want to thank you so much for taking time out of your busy summer schedules to join us tonight. Thank you for your input and your feedback. It's been incredibly helpful and valuable in this entire process, and we really appreciate it. Chandra, is there anything you wanted to say before we end? I'm all done.
Thank you, Natalie. I just want to thank everyone once again. And if we have failed to answer some of your questions, feel free to send them over to Natalie. We'll make sure we take the time. We're listening and we want to work with everyone and do a good job. Thank you.